Oh. It says we're live. But when I'm at the toggle, it doesn't say it. It says it's restricted. Can you go check the toggle real quick?
I'm going to try to get on there right now. I don't have that. I got to find that page.
Okay, it says we're live. Matt says that we're live. Okay, so
let's get started then.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Ronnie Shoemaker, and I will be the moderator for this event. Welcome, everyone, to the Phys Ed Summit of the ESPE Chat. This summit is designed for the elementary PE physical education and provide quality physical education for every child. We are an offshoot of the original Phys Ed Summit, and then we'd like to we are thankful for the leadership in developing the summit through their guidance and helping us develop the summit. Please remember that we're relying on a lot of technology during the session. If something does not seem to be working properly, please be patient, and we will start the room over and send out links to the toggle through the Twitter. Darci MickBersdorf is an elementary PE teacher in Wausau, and she in this session she will be demonstrating what is needed in a lesson plan that is designed for student learning to occur. She will refresh our memories of what you should be looking for in a plan, and we'll go through the elementary lessons to the design, a design for a fostering of learning. Darci, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you and get started with this presentation. So just give me 1 minute here to share my screen. I just lost me. Oh, here we go. There we go. All right. Let me share the screen. I'm going to share this. All right. You should see my screen now, and here comes my presentation. All right. I just got to go to present. Okay, here we are. Lesson planning for learning from the Phys Ed Summit. First, just let me take a little bit of time and introduce myself. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about myself. First, I'm very excited to be here. I think it's a fun time. My name is Darci MickBersdorf. At DMickBersdorf is my Twitter handle, and I'm from Wisconsin, as Ronnie said before. I teach physical education in the Wausau School District. It's in central Wisconsin. We have 13 elementary schools, so it's a fairly large school district. A little bit about my history, my teaching career, 12 years as a 6-8 physical education teacher, and much more at that level before children, much coaching, volunteering, after school programs, all those kind of things. 3 years as the PEP grant director. We had a PEP grant in our district for 3 years where I was the director of that grant, and it was a grant for the whole district, which is 13 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 2 high schools. Great opportunity for our school district, which kind of leads me to where I'm at today with some of these presentations. We were fortunate enough to be able to present some things at the national convention as well as our state convention, which has been a great experience. 2 years now and counting as a K-5 physical education teacher. After the grant, I came back to elementary physical education, and that's really been a great experience for me as well. And it's been very fun getting to know some different people and to work with different groups of kids and or different age of kids. So that's been kind of fun too. So a little background about me. And now I want to talk a little bit about what I hope to accomplish here today. First, I think it's important that you think about, and I get a little bit of feedback about where you're at in the process. So that'll be coming up in a little bit. We're going to try to reflect on what you are currently doing, or what we are currently doing, and which direction maybe you want to go from there. Determine what a quality lesson plan looks like and what it should accomplish, and also with that, some errors. I think that's a nice thing to look at, some errors that we make when we are making those lesson plans up. And then we're going to view some sample lesson plans. So here, I want you to just take a little bit of time and think about, where are you at in your district? As you see on the screen, lesson planning for learning is a product of standards-based instruction. And standard-based instruction takes content from the standards, and that content becomes your student learning objectives. If you have not started looking at your standards and unpacking that content, that really is the first place that we need to get started. However, I think that having a plan for our lesson plans, even if you don't 100% have that whole process started or completed, I think you can still really take some good things out of what I have to say, or just anything about lesson planning that will help you with some lesson planning, even if you don't have those standards unpacked. After the standards are unpacked, that is when you really know what it is that you want your students to know and to be able to do. That's where the content needs to come from. And I think that's a really important part of what we're going to be doing here today. I would like you to take a few minutes to take this survey. If you have a second device with you and you can scan the QR code, you can go ahead and do that. I'm going to give you a few minutes to just answer a few questions about where you're at in the process. If you don't have a second device, there is the web address that's on there on the screen is also on the Tassel page. You can click on that and get to it. It's a Google form looking for a little bit of feedback. So I'm going to give a little time for you to navigate through and find that survey and hopefully give me some feedback from that. I don't see people filling it out. There we go. We got some people coming. That's good. That's good. I get some people filling it out. Awesome. Just really trying to gauge where we're at, and so that can kind of help me a little bit to steer the presentation in the direction that people need it, or maybe want it, or can benefit most from it. So I'm going to wait a few more minutes here, just see if we can get a few more responses, and then we'll move on. Some of these responses are so interesting to what do you find most challenging when you write your lesson plans, because I think everybody has a lot of these challenges, and it's so interesting that we'll talk about it as much as we can. And I think you'll find that it's a challenge for everybody, not just you. So don't feel alone out there. I'm going to go 2 more minutes, and then we're going to move on to the next part of the presentation. We'll go one more minute. If you haven't completed it, go ahead and do that now. If you're not going to, that's fine too. If you need a little bit of time, you can complete it anytime, and I'll be able to look back and forth from that screen to the screen that I'm working on. Okay, I've shifted my screen to the next slide, and that slide is titled, Why Lesson Plans? Sometimes I think, and I do this myself too, why do I need to make a lesson plan? I already know what I want my students to do. Knowing what we want our students to do and knowing what we want them to learn really are two different things. And I think if we get caught too much in what we want them to do, we sometimes forget what we actually want them to learn. What is the bottom line of the reason that we're doing what we're doing? And the reason that we're doing what we're doing is for student learning to occur. And so lesson plans really ensure that you will teach what you want your students to learn. It holds you personally accountable that the plans that you've made are grounded in student learning versus grounded in the activity that you've planned for the students to do that day. I think that makes a big difference. I think it makes a big difference because then you yourself are held accountable to say, did I give my best effort today for my students to learn what I wanted them to learn? I think another reason lesson plans are really important is they allow for purposeful practice of skills that you determine are important for your students. This is where unpacking those standards comes in really, really helpful. If you've unpacked them and you have said that the overhand throw is an important skill for your students to learn. Now my plans, as I write that out during that overhand throw unit, whatever that looks like for you, as I write out my plans, I put in there specifically enough time and enough opportunities for my students to practice. I saw that somebody even answered that one of the most challenging things is to allow sufficient time for student knowledge and understanding. Part of that is practice time as well. And the amount of time we're never probably going to have. So if we plan lessons that really include purposeful practice time, at least we're doing the very best we can with this short amount of time that at least I have. I don't know about other people, but I only see my students 2 times a week, 2 times every 5 days for 30 minutes. So the other thing that a lesson plan does is it allows for you to support your students' learning. It allows you to say, I'm doing this, this, and this to support what I need you to learn, and that's based on what we've unpacked from our standards. Before we go much further, I'm going to ask you to reflect on some things, but I really want you to remember that we need to celebrate the good things, because I'm not going to say you're doing things wrong, but as we start through the more of this presentation, I think I sometimes get the feeling sometimes when I'm listening to presentations that, oh man, I'm not doing that very well, or I'm not doing that very well, or I didn't do that, or I don't do that. But please remember that you are already doing great things. If you're here listening to this presentation, you're already doing really great things because you are showing an interest in making yourself better. And that's what this is all about. So please celebrate that. And the other thing that I think some people get wrapped up in is they don't want to change because they're comfortable where they're at. Change is okay. It's not always necessarily great. It's not always something that you want to do, but change is okay. I mentioned in the beginning that I was a 6-8 physical education teacher for the first 12 years of my career. By year 9, 10, I was probably back to not writing a lot for lesson plans. And I'm thinking, okay, I know what I'm doing. I think I can just go ahead and do that. And I now, after really 3 years of writing curriculum and working through our grant process, and the last 2 years at the elementary, I realize how important that lesson plan is to hold me accountable. I need that accountability to make sure that my students are getting the most from me. Multiple people working together make great things happen. I know sometimes there are certain people that are hard to work with, certain people that are really easy to work with, certain people that are great to work with. But if we can get everybody working together, we really will move in a good direction, and we will move there at a much faster pace. Even though, and I'll say this a couple more times, lesson planning, curriculum writing, change process is not easy and it's not fast. So patience, patience, patience is the key. And I guess one thing, if you can take one thing away from this presentation, is there are a lot of resources out there available to use. You do not have to do this on your own. There are all kinds of books. There's all kinds of professional development. I mean, this professional development on Twitter is absolutely amazing. I know I don't spend enough time on there, but you know, you have to prioritize sometimes. And the resources out there are abundant. So use your resources. Use your resources. And the one last thing I would say about where we're at and what we're doing is be patient. It is all worth it in the end, even though it's very time consuming and it seems like it sure takes an awful long time to get anywhere. Okay? So next I want you to, before we go any further, I just want you to reflect on a few practices that you do now. I want you to reflect. I want you to think. I don't have a slide for this. I was just going to talk and ask you to think about some things. I want you to think about what are some things that you're doing right now that are going really well and you really can see student learning. So just think about that for a little bit, and think about how could you tweak that to make it just a little bit better. Is there a way that right now in your lesson planning, you might be able to change one thing to make it a little bit better? Also, I want you to think about in your district, I see this survey, in your district, if you have, I see many of us have unpacked our standards. What I mean by that, unpacking your standards, for example, for my curriculum in my school district, we went with the national standards and we unpacked them. So we said, standard one, what does standard one say? And from that, what do we know that we need our students to be able to do? So if we want competent movers, we really need to figure out which skills those are that we feel, and that's something district by district, are really important for our students to know and to be able to do. So as we reflect on that a little bit, I'm going to move on and talk about what should be included. Oops, I skipped a slide. Sorry about that. What do you already know about lesson planning? What we already know is that we need to have content in there. We need to have some practice time. We need the lessons to be engaging, which is one of the, I saw somebody said that was another thing that was challenging, finding engaging lessons. And I have a story about that today, and I'll share it when I get to one of my sample lesson plans, because that's kind of what happened today, and I think that happens a lot for us. We know we want our students to be active, and sometimes this is very difficult because we want them to be active, but we also want them to learn while they're active. I think for us, our first year of implementation of our new curriculum, this was the difficult part as we wrote our lesson plans, is how do we come up with enough activities that are really active, but also that they're learning during those activities. I think we also know that lesson planning is essential for learning, and without that, you know, we might not get that learning taking place, and that is really, really, really the key. Before we go any further, I want you to know that you are certainly welcome at any time to ask questions. Ronnie, our moderator, I should have probably said this earlier, so I apologize, but Ronnie, our moderator, would be able to work with me to get me those questions, and we should be able to answer those up. However, Ronnie,
Darci,
yes? Oh. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Sarah would like to know, she does very well with technology, and she has an Apple TV, but yep. She wants to be able to put more technology into her lessons.
Okay. specific lessons, Sarah? Is it Sarah, did you say? Is she looking for
Yes.
specific lessons or just technology in general?
I believe technology in general.
Okay, I'm just gonna wait to answer that in a little bit. I have a couple examples of how I've used technology in my sample lessons. And so I'm gonna wait for just a couple of minutes to answer that until we get a little further in the presentation. And then if she still has questions, I can maybe come up with some ideas to help her.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions, Ronnie?
Not at this time.
Okay, then I'm gonna move on. I think there are a couple big questions for you to ask yourself. If we already know these things about lesson planning, then here's the next question. Where are you getting the content to put into your lesson plans? And this goes back to the survey of, have you unpacked your standards? And you already lesson plan. Are we getting them from our, oops, I didn't click, sorry about that. Are we getting them from our standards, which if you look at the picture on our left, it's our national standards for physical education. Those are our new Shape America standards. Or are you getting them from your equipment room? And if that's the case, many people take the approach of what will we do today, which is more activity-based, instead of what will the students learn today, which is more of a standards-based. Ideally, when you're putting content into your plans, you want that content to come from the standards and not necessarily from your equipment room. So I want you to think about where is that content coming from? And if you're thinking every day, or every time you write your lesson, even if that's a day or a week ahead of time, what are my students going to do this week? We're gonna play soccer, we're gonna play team handball, we're gonna play whatever the activity is. Or are you saying, what are my students gonna learn today? We're gonna learn invasion game tactics. So we're gonna learn on-ball offense, off-ball offense. We're gonna learn to recognize when a player is open and pass them a ball by making quick passes to get it to them efficiently. And we're gonna, if I'm on off-ball offense, we're gonna learn that we create space by using fakes and cuts, or we create space by moving away from the defender. So I want you to think about where that content is coming from. Hopefully, you're thinking standards-based and not activity-based. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying kids are not active, our students are not active, because most certainly they are. And like I said, that definitely is one of the challenges as you write your lesson planning. My next question for yourself to think about is, what do your current lesson plans look like? Do they look like this, the picture on the left, where I have, okay, I'm referencing that I'm gonna work on standards 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm gonna use jump rope for a little bit. I'm gonna jog around a little bit for some time, and I'm gonna do my jump rope, and then I'm gonna do some more long jump rope, and then I'm gonna have a little bit of closure. It gives you your time, but it's not very specific. There's not a lot of meat in there to really say what the students are going to be learning. Or does it look something like the lesson plan on the left, which is just a picture? I'm sorry that didn't come out really well. It's just a picture of a lesson plan that you're going to see later in this presentation. But it's more detailed. The reason it looks the way it looks is because that kind of follows our outline of our curriculum and our other documents. It really can look how you want it to look, but doesn't have information in there that ensures student learning and ensures purposeful practice. Those are some things that that I want you to think about. Right now, speaking of lesson planning, I'm currently shifting my planning book from paper to electronic. So part of the reason I did that is because I then can go back to it every year and it's right there and I can make adjustments, or, you know, I might be able to put one column right next to the one from last year to this year, or this year to next year, and be able to really see what I did. And the reflection piece, though, is the piece that I've added this year. I'm going to explain that a little bit more when I get into our sample lesson plans, which are coming up here pretty soon. But I really want the reflection piece to be part of my PPG this year. And I don't know if you all have to write PPGs, but that's a professional practice goal that we have to write for our school district. And reflection on my lessons is going to be my PPG. And so I added that reflection piece right onto my lesson plan so that I can reflect on it. I've made changes by striking things out or coloring things or bolding them so that I can see what went well, what didn't go well. Moving electronically, I think, is going to be, I think I'm going to like it. I don't know that everybody does, but I think I'm going to like that. I'm going to pause just for a second and see if there are any questions, Ronnie.
No.
Okay.
There are no questions.
Okay, sounds great. So we're going to then move on to what a quality lesson plan might look like and how student learning then can occur. And we'll go from there. So from my experience and things that I believe are really important, what should be included in a quality lesson plan designed for student learning to occur? I think you need a clear learning focus. What do you want the students to learn as opposed to what do we want our students to do? This should come directly from your curriculum unit objectives if you have those documents created. If not, a great place to start, back to what I said earlier about there being lots of resources out there, a great place to start is with the SHAPE grade level outcomes. Those outcomes give you a good idea of what should be included at each grade level. And it tells you what level the student should be at each grade level as well. I think planned activities that teach you content in the learning focus. This is where we talk about that purposeful practice. So for example, if you're saying the learning focus is invasion games, I'll stick with my same example, and then you plan to play a game that's not an invasion game, and you don't give the kids time to practice those skills that you wanted them to learn, the on-ball offense, the off-ball offense, the tactics with on-ball and the tactics with off-ball, you don't give them enough practice to learn that, that's not part of your plan, then you're kind of defeating the purpose of coming up with that plan in the first place. All right, so learning focus, planned activities. A third thing that I think really needs to be included in a quality lesson plan is assessment. I know sometimes this can be a bad word that people don't want to talk a lot about. Sometimes people say assessment takes the place of activity. I don't agree with that. I think assessment needs to be involved in every lesson. And I think some of us right now are saying, of course we assess in every lesson. And I think you're absolutely right, we all do. But if we don't plan that assessment, what do we do with it if we don't plan it? And so I think it's important to have that as part of your lesson plan. You might not have something written every single day for assessment. And yes, of course you do assessment because you're watching students as they're doing these activities all day long. Okay, so I think it's important that assessment is part of it. It doesn't all have to be formal, summative assessment that is graded or that is reported. It can be formal or informal, it can be summative or formative, but it's critical part of planning in order to reflect on what students have learned and to shape your future instruction. If we continue to go through our plans even though our students didn't learn it, we're kind of missing the boat. The point to planning is moving on after students have learned it. I know the logistics of that are tough, but that really is the point, and it's what we should strive to do. Absolutely strive to do, even though I understand when you're thinking right now, listening to me, you have got to be kidding me. When am I going to find the time to reteach all the stuff that they didn't get? Okay, that's when I say, I don't have the time this year, but how can I plan it better next time? Or I don't have the time this unit, but how can I come back to that during my next invasion games unit and hit on those 2 spots that they really just didn't get at the level I wanted them to understand? Okay? Next, I'm going to talk about some common errors in lesson planning. Ronnie, is there anything for me before I continue?
No, ma'am. You have someone, Sarah was excited about or liked the crossing out and bolding tip for your lesson plans, but there are no questions.
Good, thank you. There's also a couple people on Twitter that have said some neat things too. It isn't just planning what students will do, it's planning what students will learn. I think that's a great point. It's a great point, and it's a way of thinking that we need to get to. Part of the reason that I'm glad Gina said that is that I think physical education is as important, if not more important, than every subject that we teach, and I hope people listening are thinking the same way. But some people in our profession are still not making it for us to say that, because we're not doing the things that we need to do in order for that to be true. So I think that's just a point to just keep in the back of your mind. I think it's important. So I want to talk a little bit, and I have them just kind of written down here, but I'm going to talk a little bit about each of them. And some of this is going to be things that I've already said, and you're going to see a little later that some of this stuff is repetitive, but it's important. So I think it is really, really important that we go over it a couple of times. Common errors in lesson planning. One is asking, what do I want my students to do today versus what I want my students to learn? Again, I don't think we need to talk about this more, but that is common error in when we write lessons. The second one I have there is having an unclear focus. If your focus isn't clear, it really leaves the students guessing what they should be paying attention to. And you know that you only have their attention for a short amount of time. So if you have a clear focus as to what you're learning today, students know these are the things that I really need to pay attention to and I really need to focus on throughout the lesson today. For example, on my board, I wish I would have put a picture on here. On my board, I have the magnet that says, welcome to physical education. What are we learning today? Right underneath that magnet, I can put 2 or 3 statements that say, this is our focus today. For example, my lesson today was overhand throwing at targets and with lots of force. That was my what was written on my board today for my 2nd and 3rd grade classes. That's what I wanted them to do. So a clear focus is really important for those students, especially those students, like I said, we know they're not paying attention all that long. Let's get them something good and let's get it to them quick. Another one, and I know I am very guilty of this and I still do it and I still need to work on it. Jamming too much content into each lesson or even into our units. This is one of the biggest mistakes that we made. It's not a bad mistake, but it's a big mistake that we made when we rewrote our curriculum. We had way too much content. We couldn't cover it all. So we tried that for the first year, and then they came back. At this time I wasn't teaching, but people came back and we said, we've got to change this. We've taken a lot out, but we still have way too much content. We can't get through it. And going back to the challenge that was on one of the what do you find most challenging when you write your lesson plans is, again, to allow sufficient time for student knowledge and understanding. If we jam way too much content into our lessons or into our units, we can't expect that students are going to master it. And in the end, that's what we want, is student mastery for those skills that we deem most important coming out of our standards. A next error might be that we offer too few opportunities for varied practice. And this kind of goes with levels of learning, but having multiple things for them to practice, where we might, for example, today I did a lesson overhand throwing, and they were practicing throwing at targets at varied levels. So we practiced at high levels, medium levels, low levels, and then choice levels. Offers for some variety, some varied practice, versus today we're all gonna aim for this. Maybe you have a red line that goes all the way around your gym. We're gonna aim for the red line today. That's what we're gonna try to hit. And how then do we get them to realize there's a difference if you're aiming for the red line or if you're aiming for a target that's high or a target that's low? So offering too few opportunities for varied practice. Another one here that I am guilty of, whole class planning versus planning for individual student, planning for individual student learning. That should be individual student learning. And I see that a couple people have said this is one of their challenges as well. Differentiation, creating plans for six grade levels, not only 6 grade levels, but all the kids within each of those grades. So we are trying to plan for our whole class versus breaking it down for individual learning. This is difficult, ladies and gentlemen. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm starting to really focus on how can I give options for different students to do things a little bit different. And I really try to do that not only in my lesson plans, but then bring that out in the actual class. Because a lesson plan is only as good as what happens from it. You know, class starts and you are doing 100 different things and you might forget all about what's in your lesson plan. But really giving kids an opportunity to make things more difficult for themselves or easier for themselves if they're struggling. In my lesson today, I never told the kids where to stand from their target. They could stand as close as they wanted or as far away as they wanted. Certain kids that I saw struggling, then I was able to help them and say, you know, wait, maybe try this. It might be a little easier for you if you're standing a little closer or a little further away. Or it might be more difficult if you move a little further away. If you hit the target that's in the square versus not just the small target, count that as a good one because that's successful for them. So whole class versus planning for individual student learning. The next one that is a common error is lack of preparation for various levels of learning, which goes right back to the whole class versus individual class. So it's really important that you prepare for multiple levels of learning and not just wing it during your lesson, during your class. So have it planned out. What can each level do? Or a lot of people, the question about technology, here's where a lot of people use technology. And they might have students using an iPad and saying, if you want level 1, click on this video. If you want level 2, click on this video. And if you want level 3, click on this video. Very honest with you, I'm not there yet. I would love to do that. And I'm thinking towards the middle of my year, I have a unit where I would like to try that out. Can you do this on the low balance beam? Can you do this on the low balance beam? And those could be definitely levels of learning for different students. The next one that is there, it's called, the next common error, I'm sorry, is practicing only in a closed environment. Where if I go back to my invasion games activity, or unit, I'm sorry, and if I want students to be able to recognize when a player is open and get them the ball, but I never put them in a position for a player to have a defender on them, they will always be open and the offensive player will never be able to recognize when they're not covered. So you have to put them into game situations, or not always games, but you have to plan the drills that you're going to do prior to the games so that the students are put into the position to make that decision. They have to have offense and defense in order for them to make that decision. Okay? The next common error I have written down here is planning for filler activities. Oh, I'm going to do this and this, but if I have 10 minutes left, then I'll just let them go ahead and do this, this, and this. Well, that's great, but remember the amount of time we have isn't very much, and the content we have is great. And so therefore, if I'm just planning activities that really don't account for student learning, then I might be planning the wrong activities. Some people, I think, from here might say, well, I wanted to have them something where they really had a lot of fun. Okay, that's great, because my kids, they love playing tag. So I take the opportunity to let them play tag, but also to teach about rating of perceived exertion. It's a great time to teach about that and how the taggers control the game, and they control how hard everybody else works by their intensity level. Can my taggers get all the way to a 5 so that they are giving it their all to basically force the other students to also bring their RPE up? That's a great way to teach that, but it's not a filler activity, because now I'm teaching about rating of perceived exertion, which is very much a big part of what we teach. I have a few more common errors here. Another one that I'm sometimes guilty of, rushing from one activity to another, not giving ample time that we need, not including assessment. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but like I said, if it's not included on your lesson plan, then you might say, oh, yep, I did it. Yep, I looked at this student and that student. Yep, I think we're good. Okay, but if you really write down, today I'm going to watch 10 kids, maybe you list those 10 students to see if they really have the on-ball offensive tactics. That's part of it. For on-ball offensive tactics, we have a rubric that we follow. I might have to look at that. I might have to jot some things down for me to make sure I'm following everything I need to follow. Next one, kind of moving on to the next. Thinking I will just know when learning happens. This is where, again, holding ourselves a little bit accountable. We can't just watch students and say, oh, yeah, they have it. I can, but what's to ensure that I am watching the students and I'm using all the same criteria? It is a rubric. I need to have that rubric that says, all right, if I'm looking at the overhand throw, I really want them to point to their target. I really want them to get that elbow high, however you say that, whatever cue you use. I really want them to step with the opposite foot. And if they can't do that, where do they fall? If they're missing one of those things, then they're probably going to be at what level? And that's an assessment part of it, but that has to be into your lesson plan. You have to think about that when you're planning your lessons. Here's a big one that you'll see in my lessons that I'm going to share, not taking time to plan questions. We really want our students thinking. And when we plan questions for them to chat with a friend about, or chat with a partner about, or think about as we walk back to the line, and now when we're lined up to go, now let me ask these questions and who's going to give me an answer. So really take the time to plan some questions. And then lastly, another error would be not including enough higher levels of learning. Too much just recall, identify, and define, and not enough apply and analyze and discuss these things that are happening in class. Okay, I'm going to move on, unless, Ronnie, do you have any questions or concerns at this point?
There was one question about where do you meet for the expectations? Do you meet at a board to review it, or where do you when do you tell them your expectations for the game or the day?
Yep, absolutely. I do it different ways, but yes, I have a whiteboard. I do not have a smart board. I do have a whiteboard, and sometimes I would have them meet there first and maybe answer some questions with a small group or with a partner. And then sometimes I would have them do an activity, get them going right away, something maybe as a review. And then I would bring them back and say, today our focus is this. We're going to work on offensive tactics. Here's our on-ball tactics that we did yesterday. Here's a new off-ball tactic that I'm really going to watch for today. I really want to see you moving when you don't have the ball and getting to open space. That's the one I'm really watching for today. And then I will cue that as I'm walking around looking. Make sense?
Okay. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, now I'm going to go on and talk a little. I'm just going to give a few sample lessons. If you have questions, please ask. Like that one that Ronnie just asked about, where do you meet them? All of those little things are so important. And so if you have any questions, please ask. This first lesson plan that I'm going to show you is day 3 of a 4th and 5th grade invasion game unit. Part of the reason that I've been using invasion games as an example here today is because that is one of my sample lessons. I think we are fortunate that our curriculum offers 2 invasion game units, one early in the year, like right now, and one later in the year. This one focuses more on offensive tactics. The one later in the year focuses a little bit more on defensive tactics. But either way, I think it's great that we have allowed ourselves to come back to the same unit, because of course I can come back to some of those things, like I said, that maybe I had a few students that just didn't get. Maybe later in the year when we come back to work on defense, I can sneak some of those offensive tactics in again, and we'll grab a few more of those kids that just didn't quite get it this time. So I'm going to click on this sample lesson, and I hope it comes up. Yay. And then I want you to know that on the Tazo page, this is on there as well. So if you want to pull it up there, you can see it, or if you want to look at it here, you can do that as well. So if we look right back kind of to where what we said was important, or what I said, I should say, is important to having in your lesson, you will notice that in this lesson, I have those topics. First, I need to know the day and the unit that I'm working on. This is day 3, Invasion Games 1. We have Invasion Games 1 and 2. The I can statements for this unit for this day, I'm sorry, there's some other ones, but for this day, here's what we are working on. Using the best offensive tactics, choices, tell you where I should move when I don't have the ball and when I should move, or when I should pass and who I should pass to, talking about recognizing those open people. And then it says, I can listen to my body and figure out how hard I'm working. That goes back to our RP scale, and we work with a lot on that. My learning focus for this day is the tactical movements, as well as tactical decisions during gameplay. Content. Here is what I'm going to do with the students to accomplish my learning focus and hit on those I can statements. So today was the first day that I really introed RP and how it relates to invasion games. We played a while. I stopped a couple of times during gameplay and had them look at the poster. We have a poster for a visual, and determine how hard they're working. Some of them, are at a 2. I'm moving, but I'm not working very hard. Some are at a 5. I'm doing everything I can out here. I can hardly talk because I'm working so hard. We reviewed the 2 on-ball tactical focal points from the last class. Recognizing an open teammate, moving him or her away from the defense towards a goal, and making quick passes to that open teammate. And then I'm going to inform the tactical focus, move away from the defender. So this is an off-ball tactic that we're going to inform this day. The activities then that I planned for the day, for my 5th grade, they were doing choice of keep away, 5 passes, or ultimate. So they had 3 choices they could make within their group. Every group could have done something a little bit different, but they had 3 choices to accomplish this goal. For 4th grade, I hadn't really taught them all the ultimate rules yet, so I didn't give them that choice. I gave them the choice of keep away or ultimate ball. I'm sorry. You know what? That should have been keep away or 5 passes. They didn't have ultimate ball for a choice that day because I hadn't taught them ultimate ball yet, and I wanted to teach it first, give them a day to play that, and then come back to choice. So they were doing either keep away or 5 passes in order to really focus on those tactics, offensive tactics. My assessment for the day was a formative whole group assessment where I drew a couple of scenarios on the board and have the students decide what they would do in each scenario. So I drew a scenario saying, telling them showing them the scenario, and their response was that the offense has to move away from the defensive player to get a pass. So I asked them, what would 02 and 03 need to do to get a pass from 01? And they would have to move. The defensive player was right next to them. They would have to move in order for that to happen. And then scenario 2, the offense needs to pass to the open player. So one O2 probably had a player right next to them guarding them, and O3 probably had a player off a ways so they could recognize that O3 was open versus O2 who was covered by the player. Therefore, the assessment is written right into that. I know at the end of class, I'm going to bring them together by the board and say, look at this picture, answer this question, and then get a little bit of discussion. And then the summative assessment, I started this day to start looking for students who recognize and usually apply the correct choices based on the rubric. If they usually apply those correct choices, then they're at the proficient level. And so I started looking at that already this third day of the unit, and I will continue to look at that all the way through day 8. Then my reflection piece. Again, this is part of my PPG. That's why I've added this reflection piece on there. I just said it was a really good day for the 4th and 5th grade. They worked really hard during the game in the 5th grade. Oh, and in 5th grade, I'm starting to see that students are making the correct decisions. This was a big thing for me because this is really about the 3rd year of this curriculum and implementation. Really, the 1st year was too much. Last year was a pretty good year for the amount of content that we're trying to teach. And then this year, I really saw a big jump from my 4th graders last year to my 5th graders this year, which is really great because that's exactly what we want. And I talked with them about that, the difference of being in 4th grade and understanding this, getting it as an introduction, and then really starting to get it in 5th grade. So that's been kind of cool. All right, so now I want to go to the next one, but I'm not sure. I think I gotta get out of this.
You have about 8 more minutes.
Yep, sounds great. Are there any questions, or can I move on to the next one?
You're good. You can move on.
All right, so this one, I'm just going to show, yeah, we'll be good. This one I'm just going to pull up and show you quick, and then I won't go through it kind of like I did last time, but I want you to know that it's there for your reference. It's just, it's a lesson of day 2, a day 2 of a 2nd and 3rd grade throw, toss, and catch unit, which I kind of gave some examples of earlier, again, because I knew I was going to do this. Again, our curriculum offers the opportunity to revisit the overhand throw later in the school year. So I'm just going to pull this one up to show you that there are basically the same things are in there. The day in the unit, the I can statements, their learning focus specific to this day, the content, the activities. The activities in this one are kind of neat. Incorporating some spelling, they're high frequency words that I get from their classroom teachers, and then also incorporating this a 4-wall throwing game that I did. It had a food theme, and it was, you know, throwing at different targets at different levels, but it also incorporated how that food is grown and what heights that food grows to. Of course, they were kind of fresh fruits and vegetables because that's what kind of grows like that. So the assessment piece for this was a little bit different because it's only our 2nd day of this unit, and I asked questions to the students as they were leaving. We went through release point. That was really important. And then the questions were, what would you do to hit a target that is high? What about a target that is low? It could be a partner walk and talk to the line, and then the whole class. It could be, show me what a good overhand throw looks like, and that might be because we've talked about those 4 points that those 4 cues. So those are assessment pieces as well. They don't have to be really detailed, but you have to be able to ask the students questions and for them to be able to give you some answers. My reflection just said I liked that I was able to incorporate some of those other things into it. Okay, and then one more, which I haven't talked about a lot, is lesson number 3. It's a kindergarten 1st grade movement language. The reason I want to talk about this just quickly is because the language in this unit builds that foundation for much of our curriculum throughout the whole school year. It's still working very hard to teach our 3 Bs during this unit, which is be safe, be respectful, and be responsible. But one reason that I chose this unit to share is because this is the unit, for us, we have to write SLOs, student learning objectives, and our SLOs are, you know, based on student learning and clearly student learning objectives. And this is the unit that I use for that. We have a post-test that we do like in early May, mid-May, and I did my pre-test during this unit. So I did my pre-test during this unit to see what they already knew, and then that could kind of shape what I use for the rest of the year and how I shape my SLO for student learning. Does anybody have any questions about those lesson plans that I have shared?
We have one question about how often you see your students.
Yes, I see my students 2 times every 5 days for 30 minutes. That's varied everywhere you go. Everybody's a little bit different, but for me, that's what it is. I know we only have a couple of minutes, so I just want to wrap it up and then see if there are more questions or comments that you would share with me. I guess I just like to leave people with, what can you do now? Is there one thing that you can take away from this presentation to enhance your own practice? Is there something you're thinking right now, that's a good idea. I could take that and try it. Or is there something that you think, you know, I do assess, but I really don't put that into my plan. Maybe I need to write a couple things down. Or maybe you need to just ask a few more questions of your students. But again, we need to write that in our lesson plan so that we ensure that we actually do it when the time comes. Maybe a better question for some of you, is there one thing that you can take away from this presentation and share with someone else to enhance their practice? Is there something you can say, hey, I saw this last night on this presentation I was at. What do you think about this? And maybe that'll spark an interest in them. And if any of you are so inclined, I would love to hear if there's one thing that you can tell me to enhance my practice. And you can do that through Twitter or however you can get in touch with me any other way. I would love to hear anything that you have to say to make it better for me. And now we've come to just kind of my end, saying, are there questions or comments that you have that I can answer? If you can always be in touch with me on Twitter. Are there any other questions, Ronnie? I know our time is just about up.
No more questions. They like your plans, and they think she always plays around with her plans. So she's liking what she sees.
Great. Well, I guess then I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. There we are. So I guess I would say thank you. I appreciate you taking your time to listen tonight. And again, be in touch if there's anything I can help with, or if you have something that you would like to share with me, I would gladly take any of that.
So thanks. Thank you, Darcy. Thank you for everybody for attending. It was a great presentation. I want to thank Phys Ed Summit for the team and the guidance for us to be able to put on this, the elementary Phys Ed. And I thank y'all, and y'all have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.